Thanks for joining another episode of the Coatings Pro interview series. As always, I'm your host, Ben Dubose. Today, we're joined by Dr. Harry Shaprailis, coatings subject matter expert at energy infrastructure company Enbridge. Harry, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, Ben. Hopefully you're doing
Thank
well
you.
down there. It's snowing up here in Canada and we're hitting at minus 18 C. So I'm not outside. So that's a positive.
And you're based near Edmonton, correct?
That's correct. Up in Edmonton, Alberta. If you are a hockey fan, we have the Edmonton Oilers up here.
Yep.
We're not off to a great season yet.
Yeah, we understand. We're based in Houston. Well, I am at least. Of course, we have team members that are spread out throughout North America and the world. But I'm in Houston where it's sunny and 60 degrees today. So, yeah, a bit nicer down here. We did just have the Astros win the World Series, which is good. However, the Rockets and Texans, our other two pro sports teams, not so good right now. So we can empathize a little bit with how the Oilers are playing.
We just need to get you an NHL team down there, then I can come visit more often.
Yeah, we do. A lot of people follow the Stars because they're in Dallas, but the true Houstonians do not like cheering for Dallas teams. So yeah, it would be nice to have one in Houston of our own so that nobody feels compelled to try and cheer for the team from, dirty Dallas to the north, if you will.
Oh, definitely.
Anyway,
I can understand that.
Yeah. So today, of course, we're talking coatings, and I mentioned you're the coatings SME at Enbridge. Give us a little bit of a career biography, both your position now and what you're doing these days, as well as a bit about the path that led you there over the last 20 years or so.
No problem. You never realize where you're going to end up when you start off as a student sometimes. Right? So my story goes back to 2001. I got a Bachelor in Science and Chemistry at the University of Alberta. So I was really gung-ho with the chemistry side of the world. And fuel cells, I don't know if you remember fuel cells, they were a big concept back in 2001. I was like, wow, green energy, fuel cells, this is going to save the world. So I immediately went to graduate studies down in the University of Calgary, graduated a PhD in electrochemistry in 2006, promised everybody at my doctoral thesis that you'll all have direct methanol fuel cells on your cell phones by the time, by 5 years. Obviously that didn't transpire. But that was sort of my first foray into coatings. Back then it was metallic based coatings. Mm-hmm. So I was working with really expensive stuff, platinum, iridium, things that you'd put on an engagement ring, right? Versus the organic coatings that I'm working with now.
Right.
There wasn't really any jobs for chemists back when I graduated in Alberta, even though we're oil rich and, at that time, it was sort of a downtime in the economy. So I ended up getting seduced to the dark side of corrosion. I did a postdoctoral thesis at S.A. Johnson & Sons in Racine, Wisconsin. And that was sort of my first foray into organic coatings because a lot of these canisters and aerosol sprays, they have an internal liner. Mm-hmm. It's an organic liner. And what happens with these companies, they'll formulate and they'll change these formulations. And sometimes they become more aggressive. And the last thing you want to have is a can that's sitting somewhere in your house and all of a sudden you get a through wall perforation and the can explodes. Right? You could imagine as a company, that's not a letter you want to receive from a customer. No. So that was my first foray into the coatings world. I quickly left, went to DNV at the time. It was actually CC Technologies, where a lot of people at that company were involved with NACE at the time. It was a big volunteering effort from that company. They were on task groups, committees, wrote standards, and just naturally through osmosis of being there, you naturally got incorporated into that structure of going, well, this is NACE. This is awesome. You have a conference once a year in nice locations and you get to meet people. So that was my first foray into the NACE AMP world. We eventually did move back to Canada. I went to work for the Alberta Research Council, which was renamed Alberta Innovates Technology Future, still in that world of corrosion. So once I went to corrosion and coatings, I haven't come back since, 2001, essentially. Eventually ending up at an end user, right? So I don't know if many listeners out there, but my career path was always, you start consulting, you learn as much as you can, and you always wanted to retire at an end user company. So back in, as you mentioned, in 2015, I joined Enbridge, and I get to do all the fun stuff from the operator side now.
So let's talk about the coatings that you typically deal with, because for Enbridge, you're protecting these energy infrastructure assets, largely pipelines, some above ground storage tanks, those types of facilities. What are some of the technologies that are out there now, and how have they evolved over, I suppose, your 7 years now, nearly 8 years since we're going into 2023 with the company?
Evolving. That's a great question. They haven't really, Ben.
Okay.
They haven't, not as much as I'd like for them to. They're mostly organic based coatings. So for below ground pipelines, at Enbridge, we use liquid coating systems, right? Mostly epoxy based. For above ground assets, it's mostly paints, right? And the paints are epoxies and polyurethanes to have that nice fresh top coat. Inside of tanks, it's an epoxy-based formulation as well for the liner. So technology-wise, we haven't seen a true step change in the technology in the last decade. Actually, you can probably go further and say like the last 30 years. I'm sure some of the listeners out there will say, well, no, I got the next best thing. But nothing that's been adopted by the main users out there, nothing that's been revolutionary. I do have one area, though, that I think has changed significantly in the last 10 years. Okay. So you just said technology, in my opinion. Keep in mind this is in my opinion. And my opinion does not necessarily represent my company's opinion. It represents my individual expertise opinion.
Right.
An area that has evolved quite a bit is actually on the contractor side. Quality. Quality assurance and quality control measures on the applications of coating systems. That has had a log change in the last 10 years. It started in Canada with CSA 24530, which is a competency spec for applicators. It's basically how do you ensure a contractor is competent? And it evolved into, progressing their product data sheets into what's called the Manufacturer Qualified Application Procedure, MQAP in Canada, which is really standardizing these between companies. Because right now, if you go out there and grab 2 product data sheets, you don't get the same information. It's not always the same test. So on the quality side, there's been, leaps and bounds, in my opinion.
So from the perspective of a pipeline operator, what are really the corrosion protection needs? What are, just at a high level, the concerns that you have when it comes to, sustaining these lines, these storage tanks over time? What are you concerned about? How do coatings fit into that? And I guess it's not just coatings. Obviously, there's cathodic protection you have to consider as well. But from a coatings perspective, what are the qualities that you're looking for, and what are the concerns you have as, the months and years progress with some of these assets?
Yeah, so AMP has done a great job on having standards out there that discuss different testing criteria and things that you need to meet to be a good coating, in quotation marks, good coating. But by its very nature, actually, Ben, what's your background, Ben? I don't know what your background is.
So I came up through like oil and gas trade pubs, and then I found my way to AMP, basically had some friends. And of course, AMP has a lot of clients in the oil and gas sector.
Yeah.
So basically I came up through oil and gas and just had connections and friends that worked at then NACE because I joined in 2016. So long story short, I came up through oil and gas publishing world.
Okay. So technically, like, not a scientific background?
Correct. Yeah. I come from a journalism background. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, cause I want to talk to that, like, not that it's a different level, but let's talk that way, right? So the easiest way to understand this is, what do we use for most of our infrastructure? It's carbon steel, right? Carbon steel, by its very nature, does not want to be carbon steel. It wants to be an iron oxide. So when we develop and refine this product, we find it as an iron oxide in its natural state. We put a lot of energy into it. It's an intensive process to produce steel. And steel naturally wants to go back to that, lower energy state, which is an oxide. So if you leave it exposed to any amount of water, right, and you can add other contaminants in there as well, it'll naturally corrode, right? And we have a whole industry and professional society based on this. So essentially what the coating's job is to prevent at first it's a barrier, right? Keeping that steel pristine and away from the environmental condition, whether it's inside a tank, whether it's, flow of a product inside of a pipeline that has water settling or sediment potentially, or whether it's on the outside exposed to the buried soil. So by its very nature, it has to be a barrier film, right? So what's the next thing that you like? Well, you want it to adhere quite well. You want it to last as long as it possibly can. You want it to resist water, moisture, but not too much, because you want it to actually work with the CP system, as you mentioned, on the cathodic protection side, right? So they got to work together. And then you find the perfect coating, Ben, and then you give it to an applicator. They got to be able to apply it, right? So this can't be, there's a lot of times that people will come to me and go, hey, I have the next best thing. It's already being used in the aerospace and in the automotive industry. And I'm like, well, that's great, but robots don't put my coating on. Right now, applicators, humans put my coating on. In the future, would it be great to have fully automated plants to do our coating application? Yeah, that'd be cool to see for sure. Right. So ease of application is very important as well. And then different features, right? So the hardest part as a chemist and as a person in the coating world is you always want something that performs under high temperature expectations and is highly impermeable, so things don't get through that barrier film, right? You want it to be highly cross-linked, right? So think of putting your fingers together and meshing them. Now, as soon as you do that, try flexing your hand and you're meeting resistance, right? So if you want something that's very chemically resistant, all of a sudden you're losing some of those physical properties you want, like flexibility. When's that important? Well, if you're walking on the coating inside of a tank, if you think of a big atmospheric storage tank, it fills with oil and the oil level doesn't stay constant. It'll actually move up and down. So now that floor is flexing up and down. So it's a really tough question now that I've worked myself into this big circle of it really depends on what you want the coating to do. So you have to cater your coating technology and make sure that it's fit for service for its application, essentially. Mm-hmm. Wow, did I confuse you now? Hopefully not.
Our listeners probably come from more of a scientific background than I do, so they may not find quite the value that I do, but I think everyone needs a back to basics approach. So I love your ability to weave anecdotes and specificity with, just a holistic overview of sort of how this fits in. We've talked about some of the application and maintenance practices. We've talked about the technologies, particularly from the standpoint of your career at Enbridge. Looking forward, I don't want to ask you about, 20, 50 years from now, but that's just way too speculative. But when we talk about the next 5 to 10 years, is there anything coming that may impact the market in terms of technologies, application practices, regulations? What do you see coming down the pike in the immediate future? I suppose the next few years, because again, anything more than that is just way too difficult to predict. But is there anything coming down the pike or on the horizon that could potentially change the market in the years ahead?
I know for sure in some areas, the VOCs or the volatile organic carbon. So you want to make sure when you're using these products, they don't release, negatively impacting compounds into the atmosphere. That's becoming more and more prevalent. And in certain jurisdictions, they're getting tighter and tighter on the requirements there. For me, like industry wise, for below ground coatings, there's a big change that's coming up in Canada. So I just want to bring this one up because I think it's important to the readers, the listeners, or those that are reading this transcript, I guess, to understand this one. And this has to do with CSA Z662 in Canada. So this is our regulatory standard up in Canada that we have to follow. And just in principle, Enbridge LP that I work for, we hold ourselves to the higher standard regardless of where we're operating. So right now, if you look at my standards and you coat a pipe, it doesn't really change if you're doing it in the US or if you're doing it in Canada. It's the same. Right, because we can't really justify to ourselves going, wait a second, we accept a lower standard in one jurisdiction versus another. So when this changes in Canada, we follow a very similar model in the U.S. side. So what does that change? Obviously, Ben, that's what the readers probably want to know. The main change there is 662 is going to actually require you to do something that's pretty game-changing to the industry. It's requiring if you coated pipe that's going to go into below ground surface, so you've coated already, come out of a plant, if it's been stored longer than 3 years from the date of coating, you need to do an engineering assessment in Canada to have it recertified, essentially. So what does that mean? It means, I don't know if you've watched the news lately, but it seems that when those pipelines are being built, it's taking a lot longer to get the pipe into the ground. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some major projects have delays as far as 6-7 years. Some have had delays of 10 years from when the pipe has been produced and the pipeline has never been built. So what does happen with the coating over time is there is degradation. And the concern from that CSA standard is how do you ensure that that pipe 3 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later still meets the requirements of the day it was coated?
Let's transition to talking about the role of AMP. And you came up through the NACE side, correct? You were saying earlier in your career?
Yes, and that was mostly, like I mentioned, through my association at CC Technologies or DNV. Most of the individuals there were NACE. Correct.
Okay, just generally speaking, what have the associations meant for you over your career? How have they helped you advance and progress and I suppose just learn more about this industry over these past couple of decades?
Oh, I think it's going to be similar to your experience in coming into AMP. Just by networking. The networking is the biggest aspect of it, right? So if you think about it, you're going to a conference or individual events with people that are in your industry, you're talking the same language, you're learning from them. So for me, the networking piece was quite large. And then let's look at the standards, right? The standards and the way we do things, SSPC and NACE standards are everywhere, right? They tell us how to do things, how to prepare a sample, how to test it, what coding can be applied, what couldn't. They even look at competencies levels. So as an industry, AMP does an amazing job in that area. For me, you know, being a young individual, when I did start at the time, you want to get involved as quickly as you can because it's good to form those relationships. So if I look back on it, I think I've had about 28 AMP papers. I'm currently a member on the AMP Conference and Events Committee. I was the vice chair and chair of our local conference committee up here, the Northern Area Western Conference in Edmonton. Just had our conference this year in the winter time frame. 500 people, right? 500 people you get to meet, many of which you know, right? And many of which you get to meet that are, you know, it's been COVID, which was nice that was over. So you got to meet people you haven't seen and you haven't, you know, talked to in over 2 years. It's been crazy. And you don't realize how much you miss that network. At least I didn't realize how much I missed that networking piece until I got taken away with the pandemic, right? Like you weren't seeing people, you weren't having those engagements. And many a good idea seems to flow over a couple of drinks with friends sometimes. So when you look at the technology advancement and understanding your industry, that networking piece is huge, in my opinion.
Where are you at on the certification side? I'm guessing you've taken some courses over your time.
Yeah. So I probably not as advanced as I should be. So when it comes to AMP certifications, I recently got my NACE CIP level 2 or my AMP coding, certified coding inspector. So I have that one right now. I don't do a lot of inspection on my side. I mostly deal with the specification writing and, you know, providing the guidance to our inspectors of what they need to do. Which by the way, Enbridge on our side does fully utilize the AMP coding inspection program. So that's something that's actually mandated for our coding inspectors. So they have to have that certification before they can do a work for us, which is critical. So really that's the only real one. I did get, hopefully not the listeners will get offended here, I did get NACE CP level 1 way back in my career, but I never kept up that credential.
Yeah. So it's level 2 now, right?
Correct. I'm just too scared to go for my senior certified coding inspector course because I know a heck of a lot in the coding world and tank world. But if you ask me about bridge work and concrete, I'm going to be like, I don't know.
Gotcha. What are some of the things you're doing now? You mentioned your work with like the Edmonton conference and some of the things in that section. What are some of the things that you're more active with on a year-to-year basis now?
Within AMP, right now that's my main commitment. I've learned over the years lately that I have to start saying no. So I've downsized my number of volunteer committees. So I am a member at large with the AMP chapter here in Edmonton. I do sit on that committee for AMP for the conference and events, but that's coming up ending this term soon. So if there's anybody listening out there and need any help on something else, let me know because my commitments will be opening up soon. I do sit on the CSA group. So that's for writing the CSA Z662 and the 245, 20, and 30 series. So those are for plant applications and for field applications of coding. So up in Canada, I do get involved in that area as well. Mm-hmm. And in general, it's I don't know how much volunteering you do, Ben, but now I'm on my kids' parent council. I help out with hockey. It's like, oh my gosh, it's a disease because as soon as you start volunteering, you can't say no.
Yeah, trust me, I know. Yeah, 100%. And it extends well beyond AMP. Yeah, anything once you get to, a bit more advanced age, once you start, the commitments come like you wouldn't believe. Yeah, you're exactly right about that.
Yeah, you're like, oh, yeah, okay, yes, sure.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Yeah, I struggle to say no, for sure. I get that completely. What can AMP perhaps do better when we're talking about the next few years? Obviously, AMP, the bridging of NACE and SSPC, we're just approaching the 2-year anniversary, which is in January. What are some of the things that the organization can do better over the next few years as we try and represent both audiences?
Oh, that's a good question. I just recently took the CIP level 2. I know they're revamping that course. When you do the pipeline coding section in that course, it is extremely outdated. So I know that they're working on fixing that material, which is great. So I think, so I guess that's number one. Look at your material, right? And refresh your material. You know, some of the material hasn't been refreshed in a while. It's good to have more current and more situational, material that you'd see nowadays if you were an inspector.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that'd be great is we are like the leading technical society for writing standards related to the corrosion field. Now that we've merged between AMP and SSPC, like who else does coatings better? I'm sure some people in Australia are hopefully not listening and getting offended now, but I think we are the definitive international committee on that. What I'd like to see personally, right? We have all the members at the table, right? There's operators, there's the suppliers, there's the consultants. It'd be great to see AMP take a more active role in leading like joint industry initiatives. Mm-hmm. So sure, you have a standard on the set area. If there's something to solve, why can't we pool these individuals together? And, companies like me can provide some funding as well and do the research that then is used to back the updating of the standards. Mm-hmm. A good example is last 2 years has been some really great papers on abrasive selection for coating performance. Right? A lot of us were taught that, you just have to have the right profile and cleanliness on a surface, and that's good enough for coating performance. It's not. So AMP might not think that this is an area that they should be involved in, but personally, I'd put my money to support an AMP initiative in that area, depending on what the research is.
So let's say you had a magic wand and could change some things about the industry. What would you do?
So I got 4. Can I do 4 wishes?
Ooh, wow. Yes, let's do it.
Okay. I'm sure I can come up with more, right? But I want to keep the listener engaged and don't have them click the close button. I think the first one, AKA like Harry Potter style, like wave my wand, would be to have contractors follow my spec with no mistakes. The issue with that is you have human error, right? And things get missed. Doesn't happen all the time, but it does still happen. So I don't know if that's robotics or getting some type of, robotics would be great because whatever you program the robot to do, it's going to do, right? So that'd be great to see robotics expanding in this field. You can see it in the automotive industry. You can see it in other sectors, but you don't really see it in the oil and gas pipeline sector as much. So that's definitely one, right? Another item for sure. People asked me this before and I answered this about 5 years ago, Ben. I don't know how you would do it, right? But how can I recoat my pipe while it's still buried? It sounds like it's impossible, right? I don't want to excavate. I don't want to impact the local environment. I want to have some type of in situ coating repair method that re-encapsulates the pipe and I'm good to go. That'd be cool. It sounds impossible to me, but lots of things sounded impossible 50 years ago for the people at that time. Right. Another one that I thought would be really cool too is cure. Like, how do you know a coating's fully cured, especially when weather comes in and it starts raining, or the temperature drops, or you're rushing to get service done and you want to make sure that the coating's not off ratio? How do you know it's fully cured? A coating that starts off, let's say, green, turns red when it's fully cured, or whatever color you want. Maybe Enbridge orange. If you get Enbridge orange, that'd be great, even better. The last one we hear a lot. Like, I looked at stuff I did 6 years ago. I think I published one on a gap analysis before I joined Enbridge on different gaps in the coating industry. Self-healing coatings, you hear about them all the time, right? It's not a new concept. A coating that gets scratched, maybe it exposes the steel, and then it heals itself. It's still it's not fully in the implementation phase yet. It'd be great to see that technology. Whether it's a below ground coating, above ground coating, every time I had people pitch the idea to me, it usually involves some really obscure application method that would not be practical. I had one looking at, digress here a little bit. I had one looking at graphene. It was great. Graphene was really hard. It's a great coating. It's really cross-linked. It's not going to get penetrated. So you don't have to worry about things. And then I ask, okay, how are you depositing it? And they're like, on copper. And I'm like, yeah, but my pipeline's made of iron. They're like, yeah, but you'd have to put copper down first, then we'll put this down. And then all of a sudden they say that and you're like, okay, you obviously don't understand how long these pipelines run. They're very long and that's very difficult to do. Yeah. So self-healing would be great. Or even for paint. Like, I don't know in your area where you live, if it's galvanized or your structural steel outside is painted, right? Depending on the environment, paint isn't the greatest sometimes. It does wear down. And I think operators in general, it's harder and harder to justify maintenance painting when it's aesthetic, right? Like, a lot of stuff we paint at Enbridge, there's a lot of things that we paint because it looks pretty, not because it's providing corrosion protection. Up in northern Alberta, the corrosion atmospheric rates are very, very low. right? But if you leave something that looks corroded, there's a natural instinct from the public to assume that it's not good, right? So if you do have painting, a self-healing coating, I think that would help in that area. Areas that we needed to fill gaps in low temperature coat. You can apply below -10°C. That's 14 F in Fahrenheit. Are we there yet? Yeah, there's some coating technologies. They're not liquid coating based though. So that's a difficult area for below ground coatings. I'll specify that for the listener because some people, there's paints that can definitely cure that low, but for below ground coating systems, there's not. I think I could keep going and going. It's funny when a wish list becomes a laundry list.
Any last words of advice for anyone that's, say, new to the industry and following in your footsteps from 20 years ago? If you're a newcomer, when you talk to somebody at these networking events, what advice do you really give them for someone that wants to, follow in your footsteps, if you will? And I guess just as a parting shot for our audience, give us some of your keys to success for anyone new to this industry.
That's a loaded question, Ben. I'll do my best. First of all, you can't follow in my footsteps. I can't follow anybody else's footsteps, right? It's so individualized, these experiences that we have, right? And how you go through your employment and where you end up in life at this point. For me, I think the biggest one is really get involved, right? You can be a seat warmer in a room, right? Or you could be an active participant. The industry needs active participants. We don't need seat warmers. So even if you're young in your career, get yourself out there. Join committees. AMP has these communities of interest. That's a great way too, right? You can pose questions as a young engineer or a young professional there and get support from other individuals that are more senior. But really, it's that volunteering. Personally, I think you need to get involved, and that's the best way for you to learn.
Of course, one way to do that in the near future is the AMP 2023 Annual Conference and Expo in Denver, Colorado. That's in March from the 19th to the 23rd. So I'll throw out a plug to that as a great way to get involved for anyone that's really trying to network and take advantage of some of these resources that Harry has thrown out. Harry, before we sign off, any contact information that you want to plug as far as yourself or your company? If somebody wants to learn more from you or Enbridge, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I think there's obviously our website, but that's all the information that's provided to the general public. If you do have an interest in asking a question, email me. I don't know how many emails I'm going to get from saying this, but it's Harry followed by a period, followed by my last name, which hopefully is on the website that's posting this, because otherwise, if I spell it now, you're still not going to get it right. So harry.chaparailis@enbridge.com. I will be in Denver, right? So if you want to shoot me an email and grab a coffee then to talk about your own personal development, I can do that. That's not an issue. Get a hold of me early because, as you can imagine, schedules quickly fill up. And if you do send me an email and you don't hear an answer, send me an email again a week later and then do it one more week after that. And then if I don't answer, I apologize again. But life gets busy, right? And everybody's busy nowadays.
For sure. And I think that's definitely going to be the case once we get on the other side of the holidays, which is when we'll be running this. So yes, please send follow-up emails. I agree with that. If I miss something, it's often because it's buried in an avalanche of emails that I get, especially if it's after the holidays or I've been out for a little bit of time. So yes, send that email again and you might have a bit better luck with the response depending on exactly when it is that the person sees it. Completely agree with that advice. Folks, good stuff there from Harry Chaparailis. He's the coding SME at Energy Infrastructure Enbridge. And of course, he mentioned how you can get in touch with him. And you can follow the company at enbridge.com, and they've got all sorts of resources as far as, well, of course, they have a massive website because they want to tell the general public what's going on. But yeah, you can find in-depth contact information there as well if you want to get in touch with Harry or anyone else at the company to learn more. With that, we'll bring this to a close. For Harry, I'm Ben Dubose, news editor at AMP. If you want more resources from us, you can go to amp.org, materialsperformance.com, or coatingspromag.com. Those are the websites for our publications within AMP, Materials Performance Magazine, and Coatings Pro Magazine. Again, thanks as always to you guys for listening. Thanks to Harry for joining, and please come back soon for another new podcast from AMP.